Thousands marched across major German cities in one of the largest anti-conscription protests in recent years. The demonstrations erupted as the government pushes ahead with reforms to modernize military service, days after the Bundestag approved a new voluntary program requiring all 18-year-olds to declare their willingness to serve. The protests, spanning Berlin, Hamburg, and Munich, drew parents, students, and anti-war groups. Many feared Germany is laying the groundwork for broad mobilization, warning that the proposed Military Service Modernization Act could eventually allow compulsory call-ups through a lottery system if volunteer numbers fall short.
Yes, I am here today as a mother, and I'm extremely worried about my sons. I have 2 sons, who are almost 17 and 14, who will be affected by the new rules. And the new draft law contains a lot of subjunctive moods. If necessary, improvements can be made, but there are simply far too many things where we don't know what they really mean. Setting up lottery procedures for one generation can tear an entire generation apart. And as a mother, I want to prevent that at all costs, under any circumstances. And I didn't raise my children to send them off to war afterwards.
For many families, the reforms represent a direct threat to their children's future, with concerns that vague clauses could be expanded if security conditions deteriorate. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Germany's increased NATO commitments have revived debates that had largely faded after conscription was suspended in 2011. Young people led much of the mobilization, arguing that the new system restricts personal freedoms. With student strikes planned in nearly 90 cities, youth groups warn the reforms risk conditioning a new generation for war under the pretext of national preparedness.
We are here today as a strike committee and as striking schoolgirls because we see that the new Military Service Modernization Act is a blatant restriction for young people and for their freedom rights. The act includes compulsory conscription for all young men born from 2008 onwards. And that alone is a massive restriction of freedom. And if there are not enough young people who volunteer for the Bundeswehr, there will be talk of reinstating full compulsory military service. That is a massive restriction of freedom, and young people are not prepared to sacrifice 6 months of their lives for something that makes no sense to them.
In Hamburg, parents expressed alarm that teenagers born after 2008 will be the first to undergo mandatory registration. Many argue that Germany never permanently abolished conscription and that geopolitical pressure is now bringing it back.
It's a demonstration against conscription. Compulsory military service was only suspended, and that was always clear for a long time. Our sons were born in 2008, and they will be among the first to be called up again under this new system. And we are against it. We don't want conscription. We don't want our sons to have to go to war.
Other demonstrators linked the reforms to Germany's broader military expansion. Berlin has committed over $100 billion to defense, part of Chancellor Friedrich Merz's push to build Europe's strongest conventional army. Critics say the voluntary scheme is a precursor to re-militarisation.
What this actually means is that this is the reintroduction of compulsory military service through the back door. And this move must be seen in the broader context of preparation for war, with the more than 100 billion euros that have now been made available as a so-called special fund for the military. It is all part of the same direction.
In Munich, anti-war activists marched with calls to prioritize welfare and education over defense spending. Some warned that Germany's tightening alignment with NATO could pull the country closer to confrontation with Russia.
I am firmly convinced that NATO is actively planning a war against Russia, and I am very afraid of that. I don't want Germany to be drawn into a war that ordinary people never asked for. And if I were in the place of the refugees who came here since 2015, I would think very carefully about whether I would want a German passport, because they are the ones who could be sent to the front line instead of the politicians' sons.
Protesters also argued that any form of mandatory service would disproportionately impact working-class youth. Many said Germany's history demands restraint, not a renewed militarization of society.
Because I don't want to die on the Eastern Front, and because we don't want to die in the war of the rich, we don't feel represented by this government. We would rather live in a world where we don't have to fear that our rent won't be enough, where young people can have a future, an education, and a life with prospects, not a future that forces them into war.
Despite nationwide pushback, the Bundestag has approved the voluntary service program starting January 2026. Men must submit the mandatory questionnaire, while women may do so voluntarily. From mid-2027, all 18-year-old men will undergo compulsory medical exams to assess fitness for service, a measure the Defense Minister says is essential for national readiness. For many Germans, the real concern lies in what follows. If volunteer numbers fall short, Parliament could activate compulsory service. As defence pressures rise and memories of past conflicts linger, public resistance continues to collide with the government's drive to reshape Germany's military posture.